Up next on the broadcast, President Park's updated cabinet starts operations with 5 new ministers covering the economy, security, education, labor, and gender. The country's new finance minister pledges to revive the housing market and remove dysfunctions in the market, including companies sitting on large amounts of cash without adequately returning dividends to investors or investing in future projects. Led by BRICs nations, a new development bank may soon rival Western-dominated institutions like the IMF and World Bank, all in a bid for developing economies to fund projects in developing countries. Primetime News begins now. Good evening, I'm Sean Lim, and welcome to Primetime News.
And I'm Kang Chae-ri. Thanks for joining us. Tonight, we begin with President Park Geun-hye's new cabinet. Certainly, there were hiccups along the way, with some nominees being dropped due to disputes over their credentials.
But now the president is hoping to get back to business. Our Chae Yu-sun starts us off.
President Park Geun-hye has appointed 5 of her cabinet nominees who were confirmed by Parliament last week. Her spokesperson said the president appointed Choi Kyung-hwan as the new finance minister and deputy prime minister and Lee Byung-gi as the head of the National Intelligence Service on Tuesday. She also appointed Choi Yang-hee, Lee Ki-kwon, and Kim Hee-jung as the ministers of science, labor, and gender equality, respectively. And despite the parliament's disapproval, President Park went ahead and appointed Chung Jong-sub as the new security minister. The president, who retained the current prime minister after her 2 previous nominees stepped aside and who withdrew her nomination for education minister Tuesday, cannot afford further delays in handing over state affairs to a new cabinet. After dropping education minister designate Kim Myung-soo, who was grilled by parliament over allegations of thesis plagiarism, President Park quickly nominated Hwang Woo-yeol, her political aide and a prominent figure within the ruling party. Hwang is close to the president, and if confirmed by the National Assembly, he would join new finance minister Choi Kyung-hwan as the president's 2 deputy prime ministers, a move likely intended to expand cooperation with the parliament. Meeting with the ruling and opposition parties' leadership in recent days, President Park sought the parliament's cooperation on a series of bills to revitalize the economy and others to reform the government and public sector in the aftermath of April's ferry tragedy. Meanwhile, Culture Minister nominee Chung Sung-gun, who was not confirmed by the National Assembly, dropped his bid Wednesday morning. Chae Yu-sun, Arirang News.
So the president almost completed her first major shakeup today, and to dig a little deeper, we're joined by Professor Pak Sangin from Seoul National University in our studio. Thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you for having me.
And this cabinet reshuffle was supposed to sort of help her reform drive spurred by the April ferry disaster. How successful do you think the process of nominating these people was?
Unfortunately, I don't believe it was successful at all. Naming high-rank officers in Park Geun-hye government was and has been the weakest link.
Do you think the hiccups that we've had for the past couple months or so will hurt the president and her reform drive? What do you think?
It may hurt president, but it could be kind of good for her at the end, because if she changed the process of naming high-rank officers, and if she finds a better way to communicate with opposition leaders and ruling party leaders, and if she can accommodate more fundamental wishes or fundamental policy issues which the Korea is now faced with.
Do you think we place too much emphasis on who the person is in the role of these cabinet ministries? Do you think that perhaps that we can engage more of private businesses and civil society to take care of some of these problems that we're relying on the government so much for?
Thing is, as you know, the Korea has experienced a rapid economic growth since 1960s. The government and 재벌 played critical and leading roles in the economic development. However, as a consequence of economic development, the government-led 재벌-centered growth strategy may not be effective anymore. So the fundamental issue in Korea is to install law and institutions to guarantee a healthy market economy and active civil society.
So nevertheless, this new cabinet was supposed to bear the brunt of the blame for the Seoul ferry disaster and then some of the other issues that we've had with our government agencies. But do you think that's an effective, it has been effective in calming down the public and making them feel like there's justice served, especially when we're going into the by-elections at the end of this month?
People, especially the family of the victim, are not happy with the measures after, for instance, for special law for the Seoul ferry disaster. So, that will be one factor in the by-election. But at the same time, there could be some other issues as well. For instance, I mean, in my opinion, the by-election will be a litmus test for the leadership of the opposition party. So it will signal how much people are satisfied with the opposition.
And so just to finish off talking about the new cabinet reshuffle, cabinet members, that is, what would be some of the primary tasks that they have on their hands coming in?
I guess, I mean, the primary test is going back to the kind of basics. There is a Korean proverb which says, 바쁠수록 돌아가라. In English, it means when you are in a hurry, you have make a detour. So they have to pay more attention to the fundamental issues I mentioned. So that is the thing they have to do as a first priority.
All right, so work on the fundamentals first. That would be the lesson from In Depth today. Thank you very much for coming in and sharing your insights with us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Curry's comments came in response to
your gateway to the day's biggest stories in Korea and around the world. Breaking news, the hottest interviews, and a whole lot more. Join Arirang Sean Lim and Kang Che-ri from the heart of Seoul.
News begins now.
Primetime news, weeknights, live at 10 on Arirang TV.
And in this next report, we zoom in on new Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan. On his first day at work today, Minister Choi promised aggressive fiscal measures to boost the Korean economy. Na Hyun-kyung tells us more.
Low growth, a downsized economy in pursuit of better place, an absence of notable results. I think this is the reality we are faced with.
New Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan has made it clear that he will be proactive in his new role. In his inauguration speech Wednesday, Choi said passive macroeconomic policies have caused the Korean economy to slow down and have also resulted in less tax revenue. One of his plans to tackle those problems was to reform unnecessary restrictions that keep businesses from finding new investment opportunities.
When companies do well, they will, in return, create more jobs and up the earnings for households, which will spend more. We need to establish this virtuous cycle in order to strengthen domestic demand.
As he has long been hinting since being nominated, Choi reiterated plans to ease the debt-to-income and loan-to-value ratio regulations for mortgage loans to prop up the real estate market. Experts say the challenge will be doing so without drastically increasing already soaring household debt, on top of trying to boost consumer sentiment, which dipped after the April ferry disaster. Choi said the nation's growth outlook will have to be revised down and that an adjusted roadmap will have to be established, but added the ministry will not seek a supplementary budget this year. Na Hyun-kyung, Arirang News.
Korea's central banker agrees that regaining consumer sentiment is essential to stoking economic growth here. But he cautioned against lowering interest rates, citing ballooning household debt as a major threat to this economy. Myung-kil has this report.
Mounting household debt, that's what Korea's central bank chief thinks is the biggest threat to Korea's economic health. Bank of Korea Governor Lee Ju-yeol expressed concern on Wednesday that household debt is rising at a faster rate than income growth, and that loan extensions are growing, particularly in non-banking institutions. Lee told an economic forum in Seoul that overall household debt is not expected to develop into a financial system failure, as high-income earners account for 70% of total household debt. But the low-income earners are having trouble paying off their bills. Those who spend more than 40% of their income servicing their debts accounted for 11% of debt holders last year, up from 9% from a year earlier. He was on same page with the new finance minister Choi Kyung-hwan that spurring consumer spending and corporate investment are the keys to bolstering growth. But he said lowering key interest rate leads to a rise in household debts, eventually hurting purchasing power. As for the overall economic outlook, he added that growth would recover in the third quarter of the year, but there were risks of lower than expected growth in view of the volatility of the Korean won and the lack of confidence among businessmen and consumers. The central bank lowered its economic growth last week by 0.2 percentage point to 3.8% for this year. Myung-kil, Arirang News.
South Korea-Japan relations have certainly seen better days. Years of conflicts over territorial and historical differences have driven a big wedge between the two, but new signs indicate that ties may be about to take a turn for the better. Pak Sangin reports.
Top diplomats from South Korea and Japan may meet for talks next month on the sidelines of the ASEAN Regional Forum in Myanmar. Diplomatic sources in Seoul said Wednesday that such a meeting would be favorable, although nothing has been decided yet. If it happens, it would be the first talks between South Korean Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se and his Japanese counterpart Fumio Kishida this year. The possibility will likely be discussed when the two countries resume their monthly meeting on the so-called Comfort Women issue in Seoul next week. It will be the first such talk since Japan carried out a review of the Kono Statement, its landmark apology to the victims of its wartime sexual enslavement, issued in 1993. A thick frost has settled over Seoul-Tokyo ties in recent years, stemming from historical controversies and Japan's territorial claims over Korea's Dokdo Island. But at the same time, Japan has made public its desire on numerous occasions to talk with South Korea, which may have put Seoul in a difficult position to repeatedly turn a cold shoulder. Washington may also be playing a part. The U.S. wants a firm trilateral security alliance with South Korea and Japan and has tried to end the squabble, especially as Tokyo appears to be cozying up with Pyongyang. To reaffirm their joint commitment in dealing with North Korea's nuclear program, the chief nuclear envoys from South Korea and Japan held talks in Tokyo on Wednesday. But whether the string of bilateral meetings will thaw years of icy relations remains in question. Pak Sangin, Arirang News.
Korean dramas and Korean pop music have made a name for themselves on the global stage in recent years. So is Korean fashion next? Well, those taking part in the country's largest fashion trade show certainly think so. Our Pak Ji-won reports from the scene.
The next global trend to come out of Korea is believed to be K-fashion, following in K-pop's footsteps. This show is part of Korea's biggest fashion business market and trade fair, which aims to help the country's up-and-coming designers venture into the overseas market. EXO, one of the hottest K-pop idol groups around, attended the opening to boost exposure of K-fashion. For designers, trade shows like this are considered the first step towards presenting their works on runways at major collections around the world. That's why young Korean designers like Kim Hee-jin participate in the fair, hoping it leads to lucrative opportunities.
In just a couple of hours, I was approached by foreign buyers from China and Italy. They said they like my designs and it seems like contracts will soon follow.
Influential foreign buyers think Korean designs have what it takes to thrive on the global market.
Back to basics in the colors and in the fabrics, but with this extreme cure about details. So everything that reminds me about a little bit like Rick Owens, Gareth Pog.
Over 120 brands and designers participate in the three-day event, which acts as a sneak preview for some of the trends that may reappear during Seoul Fashion Week in October. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
A growing number of college students are choosing to spend their summer breaks here in Korea, not on vacation, but to shore up their academic credentials. They're taking advantage of Korean universities that offer summer courses, and they're gaining a better understanding of Korea and the process as well. Our Shin Se-min reports.
Socializing with Korean students and immersing themselves in cultural activities. Students from over a dozen different countries gather at a Korean campus. They are taking part in an international summer course program for students and professors that a growing number of private universities in Korea provide.
With nearly 100,000 international students currently residing in the nation, more colleges are designing programs and scholarship opportunities in hopes of bringing the world to Korea.
To differentiate their experiences while spending the summer in Korea, universities have expanded the number of science and technology-related courses, which is something students expect due to Korea's tech-heavy reputation. Universities also send students outside the classroom and into internships at Korean-based companies, organizations, and even broadcasting stations. The opportunity to spend a summer overseas while adding college credits isn't reserved for those with money readily available.
As a non-profit organization, we, the university, have the obligation to foster young students regardless of their background. So we try to broaden our view by inviting students from developing countries and eventually letting globalization work on our campus.
Great benefit for us because we get to come here with the scholarship so that we can have a good opportunity to stay here, like learn about new things of Korea people.
Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
The leaders of the BRICs group of emerging economic powers have agreed to set up a new development bank with an initial capitalization of $100 billion.
With more on that story, we now turn to Paul Yee at the News Center. Paul, what kind of impact are we likely going to see from this deal?
It could radically overhaul the existing global financial order. The BRICS nations are forging a multi-billion-dollar financial alliance, agreeing to establish a development bank that they hope will rival Western-dominated institutions like the IMF and World Bank. Our Connie Kim reports.
The leaders of the 5 BRICS nations have signed a deal to launch a $100 billion development bank and a currency reserve pool with the aim of challenging Western-dominated institutions like the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund.
This will not only help increase the voice of BRICS nations in terms of international finance, but more importantly will bring benefits to all the people in the BRICS countries and for all people in developing countries.
The new development bank, announced at the 6th BRICS Summit in Fortaleza, Brazil on Tuesday, will fund infrastructure projects in the founding members, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, as well as other developing nations. With its headquarters in Shanghai and India as president the first year, the bank will start out with $50 billion in capital, with each BRICS country paying in an equal amount. Total capital is expected to eventually double to $100 billion. A so-called contingent reserve arrangement will also be created where each country will put in a designated amount in case of a currency crisis. The contingency fund will amount to $100 billion, with China contributing $41 billion, followed by Brazil, Russia, and India putting in $18 billion each, and South Africa chipping in $5 billion. BRICS represents about 42% of the world's population and accounts for roughly 1/5 of the world economy.
The launch of the institution is being seen as a landmark achievement as the 5 countries started summit talks in 2009 to counter the influence of the West. If everything goes according to plan, the new development bank will start lending in 2016. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Syrian President Bashar al-Assad has been sworn in for a new 7-year term as the country's bloody civil war enters its 4th year. Assad has told supporters that his re-election for a 3rd term marked a victory in an ongoing revolution, reaffirming his grip on power in the government. On the international front, experts say he'll try to capitalize on the growing fear of Islamic extremism to gain support, especially with the rise of the militant group ISIL in Iraq. Assad was sworn in at the presidential palace in the capital of Damascus on Wednesday, where he warned Western and Arab governments that they would pay for backing the rebel coalition. Assad won the June 3rd poll in a landslide. However, controversy erupted when polling stations were only held in regime-controlled areas, and the other 2 candidates had been pre-approved by his administration. The conflict in Syria has torn the country apart, killing more than 170,000 people and displacing millions. And finally, a massive typhoon is battering the Philippines with torrential rains and violent winds in the strongest storm to hit the country this year. At least 13 people have been killed and over 370,000 residents ordered to evacuate in the wake of Typhoon Ramasan. According to the National Disaster Management Council, many of the fatalities were people who died after being hit by falling trees, power lines, and buildings. Widespread blackouts have also been reported, with millions of households still without electricity. But the Philippine Red Cross said greater public cooperation with the government helped to reduce the number of casualties and damage. The Tropical Storm Risk Agency predicts the typhoon, also known as Glenda, will gain strength over the next couple days once it heads back to sea before heading to China. And that wraps up our look at international stories making headlines around the world. I'll see you back here tomorrow night.
Hello and welcome to Primetime Sports. I'm Stephen Che. Let's get started with the MLB All-Star Game. The American League, for the 2nd year in a row, defeated the National League by a score of 5-3. The AL started hot in the first with a Derek Jeter double, a Mike Trout triple, and a Miguel Cabrera home run for 3 runs, but the NL tied it up by the 4th. Then in the next frame, Trout doubled with 2 men on to put the AL up for good and give Max Scherzer the win. And so the 22-year-old Mike Trout earned the All-Star Game MVP honors, becoming the 2nd youngest player to do so. Meanwhile, Yankees captain Derek Jeter in his final All-Star appearance ended with 2 hits and a run scored before leaving in the 4th inning to a standing ovation. Meanwhile, the KBO holds its All-Star Game on Friday. But before that, let's get to Wednesday's top KBO matchup between the Nexen Heroes and Lotte Giants. Now, Nexen's Andy Van Hecken and Lotte's Chang Won-jun go 3 scoreless innings. Then we go to the top of the 4th when Nexen's Yu Han-jun hits 1 home and he scores a run himself in the 3-run rally. Now, Lotte pulls Chang after the rally. Song Seung-jun comes in. Then later in the 7th, Park Dong-won hits a solo homer for Nexen. It's 4-0 Nexen. Now, Lotte makes it close in the bottom of the 9th, but Nexen closes out to win 4-3. And looking at the other games, we have Hanwha beating SK 12-3. Meanwhile, the other 2 games are still in action. NC leads Tusan 10-7 in the 9th inning, and LG is leading Samsung 9-2 in the 9th inning as well. And staying with baseball, the SK Wyverns have waived slugger Luke Scott after he got into a verbal altercation with team manager Lee Man-soo. Scott told reporters after Tuesday's game against the Hanwha Eagles that he and management argued over the type of rehab he was getting for his foot injury. The 36-year-old was heard calling Lee a liar and coward. SK waited less than a day to pull the plug, saying his actions were detrimental to the team. And ending off, the Open Championship, commonly known as the British Open, is set to tee off at Royal Liverpool on Thursday. The year's third major will have something, rather someone, the last two didn't have. That's a supposedly healthy Tiger Woods. The three-time British Open champ said he's almost at the level of play he wants to be at. Meanwhile, defending champ Phil Mickelson handed in the winner's claret jug in hopes of earning it back in the next 4 rounds. Well, that does it for me for now. I'll see you back here later for more from the world of sports.
Hello and welcome. I'm Kim Bo-kyung with your latest weather update. We begin with some welcome news as monsoon showers are forecast tomorrow, which will take care of the dry conditions. The rain should begin in Jeju early tomorrow morning, spread to the southern regions in the afternoon, and make its way up to the central regions by the evening. Jeollanam-do province is set to get the most precipitation of up to 60 millimeters, and other regions are looking at about 5 to 40. Plus, this may be accompanied by strong winds and thunder from time to time. At the moment, it is raining in Jeollanam-do province, and tomorrow's rainfall will bring down temperatures slightly compared to today. Otherwise, keep in mind that another round of showers is in store over the weekend. On to Thursday's readings. Seoul jumps to 31, Gwangju and Busan to the mid-20s. As for other places, Daejeon and Jeju hit 28, Dokdo and Bangkok make it to 26 and 31. That's all I have for you now, but don't forget to tune in for more updates after midnight.
All right, that's our broadcast for this evening.
Thanks for joining us. We'll see you soon.